I thank Christopher Harris for me not spending some time in a Pennsylvania penitentiary. But recently I found out from Ancestry.com that I'm 54% Norwegian and Swedish. So I guess I'm an American, a North-Swedish American. Until I met Christopher Harris. Christopher Harris didn't put up with any of that. Christopher Harris is the CEO of Unhyphenated America. He's one of the most exciting guys that I've met in recent history, and he's going to talk to us tonight about getting ready for next year, for this year. Chris, the floor is yours. I messed up. You guys are used to this. But with us tonight, she wasn't part of a party process. Rather, Heather Mitchell is the candidate for the 2nd House of Delegates District, and she's with us here tonight. Thank you.
Everyone hear me okay?
No.
All right, I'm speaking a little bit more. How about that? Back to back. A little bit higher. Okay. I can project my voice. Better? All right. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for coming. I know that some of you reside and have traveled from other states to be here today, and I appreciate you. I especially want to thank the members of the Prince William County GOP, particularly the Chairman, Bill Card, for honoring me with this invitation to address you here today. Also want to thank my Proverbs 31 woman, my lovely wife Tanya, for always being by my side. My helpmeet, my partner in life, and the one who helps pick out my ties. You know, when I was doing radio interviews on a regular basis, I used to always address current events by referencing scripture and throwing in some lessons from American history and, when possible, bring a little world history for added perspective. So when the opportunity was presented to me to speak tonight, I was raised, I figured, I said, hey, you know, I'll just do what I always do. But I have to tell you all that I'm a Christian. It's who I am. I know that there are people present here of many different faiths, and so I don't profess my faith in a braggadocious or prideful way or to beat you over the head with my faith. But my faith is who I am. Professing to you that I'm a Christian is simply me telling you that I'm a flawed man who is eternally grateful to have been forgiven for my sins. My faith has molded me into the man I am, and without it, you wouldn't even know who I am. So with that being said, you know, when I took some time in prayer, it was revealed to me that this is not just a radio interview. It's not something I can just kind of go off the cuff like I always do. I think I did a lot of radio interviews half-sleep because I know this information, but it was revealed to me that, you know, this is a little bit something different. You find people came here tonight partly to hear a message from me, but I have to tell you that I didn't come here to deliver a message from Christopher Harris. See, my Heavenly Father revealed to me that I, by myself, am not enough to deliver the message that you need to hear, at least not the way the message needs to be delivered. So I hope you all will receive this message with the knowledge and understanding that it's not just a message for your head or your heart, but also for your spirit. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Aaron.
Thank you, Aaron. See, I told Bill that I didn't exactly have a warm, fuzzy message to deliver, and he basically told me to let it rip. So if anyone's upset, don't blame me. Blame Bill for inviting me. And if you leave here upset, at least the food was pretty good. Thank you. So anyway, before I set it off, allow me to share a quick joke with you. A preacher was preparing a dying man for his journey into the afterlife. Whispering firmly, the preacher said to him, "Denounce the devil. Let him know how little you think of his evil." The dying man said nothing. The preacher repeats his order again. "Denounce the devil. Let him know how little you think of his evil." Still, the dying man said nothing. The preacher asked, "Why do you refuse to denounce the evil of the devil?" The dying man replied, "Until I know exactly where I'm headed, I don't think it's such a good idea to aggravate anybody just yet." So, my message for you today dovetails rather nicely with that joke, because oftentimes truth is found in humor. My message for you today is quite simply that it's time for the GOP to stop playing it safe.
Yeah.
In the very first issue of his anti-slavery newspaper, The Liberator, William Lloyd Garrison stated, "I do not wish to think or speak or write with moderation. I am in earnest. I will not equivocate. I will not excuse. I will not retreat a single inch, and I will be heard. I come to you today to speak for the necessity of unity in the fight for the cause of liberty. It's not time to be moderate. It's not time to be lukewarm." In Revelation 3:16, the scripture says, "So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will spit you out of my mouth." It's time for the GOP to remember who we are, or the voters will begin to spit us out. We are the party of liberty. We're the party of personal responsibility. We're the party of compassion for your fellow man. We are the party that believes in an unhyphenated America. And we're the party that is willing to fight to the death for our unalienable rights. You see, what I've witnessed far too much of over the past nearly 20 years, and what I've noticed in my extensive study of the political history of this nation, is that for most of the 20th and the 21st century so far, is that the GOP has apparently had the goal to simply survive. To just go along to get along. To try not to offend anyone. To just be the moderate opposition to the Democrats. And it's time for that crap to stop.
Yeah!
It's time to man up and roll up and go fight to win. Stop playing it safe. One of my favorite movies is the phenomenal movie Braveheart. And one of my favorite scenes is when Sir William Wallace starts to leave the room when the Scottish nobles start squabbling and bickering. And one of the nobles says, "Sir William, where are you going?" And William Wallace said, "We've beaten the English, but they'll come back because you won't stand together." The noble says, "Well, what will you do?" Wallace said, "I will invade England and defeat the English on their own ground." The noble said, "Invade? That's impossible." And Wallace said, "Why? Why is that impossible? You're so concerned with squabbling for the scraps from Longshank's table that you've missed your God-given right to something better. There's a difference between us. You think the people of this country exist to provide you with some possessions. I think your possessions exist to provide those people with freedom, and I go and make sure they have it." You see, ladies and gentlemen, that sort of boldness is the type of boldness the GOP had at its formation in 1854. If you're part of the GOP, and you think that Republican voters exist to provide you with possessions, shame on you. If you think that playing it safe is what you need to do in order to get into and remain in power, shame on you. People don't follow safe. When leaders play safe, the people have to suffer and endure. We, the people, want to follow exciting. We want to follow enthusiasm. We want to follow passion. And we want to follow vision. America itself is a vision. It's an idea. Quite frankly, it's an idea and vision that could have only come from our Heavenly Father. Because at no other point in human history, in recorded human history, has the concept of unalienable rights been so clearly defined and codified in one document. The very existence of America is from the confluence of three distinct ideas. America was created when Greco-Roman philosophy, the use of logic and reason, met Anglo-Saxon law, which made it clear that not only is the king not above the law, but then all that was placed on the foundation of Judeo-Christian morality, which asserts that there is one God who is the creator of the universe and everything in it, and that all mankind was created in his image, and thus was gifted at the moment of our conception with certain unalienable rights. That's America. The GOP should make it clear that we are the party most devoted to protecting the rights of the minority, because the smallest minority is the individual.
Yep.
And the smallest minority group is the traditional nuclear family. So in Proverbs 21, the scripture said, the wicked flee when no one is pursuing, but the righteous are as bold as a lion. Stop playing it safe. Did you know that John Quincy Adams was the only man to leave office as President of the United States and then become a U.S. Congressman? His reason why is because he felt compelled to end slavery. That was his singular cause, his sole focus. And he lost many political battles, and they even went so far as to create gag rules to silence him. But Adams was bold as a lion. So when he was asked why he persisted even though it seemed hopeless, he said, duty is mine, results are God's. I want to tell the folks in this room, but not just in this room, but for the entire GOP, we have a duty to protect liberty. We have a responsibility to stand up for the most vulnerable people in the world, the unborn children. There will come a day when those who either promote or even stand quietly by as the heinous practice of abortion takes place in America, there'll come a day when they will be held in the same contempt as those who held slaves in America. I don't have time to see the more depth of the story, but during their brief time serving together in the U.S. House of Representatives, the relationship between former President John Quincy Adams and future President Abraham Lincoln had a profound effect on Lincoln, which ultimately ended up having an effect on America and the entire world. Adams taught Lincoln that we have a duty to perform and that we're to leave the results up to God. President Ronald Reagan famously said that freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it to our children in the bloodstream. It must be fought for, protected, and handed on for them to do the same. Stop playing it safe. Folks, we cannot have freedom without personal responsibility. And personal responsibility is most certainly not passed to our children in the bloodstream. It has to be taught and it has to be caught because it is lived and modeled by the parents. A couple of weeks back, I was at the gun range with a new friend of mine, Brandon, who was supposed to make it tonight, but he had something come up and couldn't make it. But you know, after Brandon and I left, we went to the gun to grab lunch, and he was supposed to be following behind me in his car, and I arrived at the destination before he did, and after about 10 or 15 minutes of sitting there at the table waiting for him to show up, I called him. I said, "Dude, did you get lost?" And he said, "Sorry, I'll be there shortly. I'll fill you in when I get there." Well, the long story short is when Brandon was getting ready to get on the highway, he saw an older lady fall on a street corner. So he turned his truck around and circled back to see if she needed some help. You know, I thought that was pretty awesome, but then I remembered Brandon is an Eagle Scout. And that's just how he was raised. He could no more turn his back on that woman and say, hey, it's somebody else's problem, then he could forget to breathe. That compassion for his fellow man that he displayed and the belief in personal responsibility is the foundational part of the American character. See, we live in a world full of entitled young people who are filled with a sort of self-righteous indignation that seems to be inherent to the ignorance of youth. They want to fix the world, and they want big government to do it. In typical youthful ignorance, it's never once occurred to them to look in the mirror and fix the person in the mirror. Personal responsibility is a foreign concept to them, partially because of ignorance and partially because of the indoctrination we have allowed them to receive in the public school system. Confucius said, attack the evil that is within yourself rather than attacking the evil that is in others. President Theodore Teddy Roosevelt said, if you could kick the person in the pants responsible for most of your trouble, you wouldn't sit for a month. President John Adams said that children should be educated and instructed in the principles of freedom. And there's someone I respectfully call that dude, Booker T. Washington, who I personally believe is easily one of the top 10 greatest Americans ever. And he said, character, not circumstances, makes the man. Teddy Roosevelt once again said, to educate a man in mind and not in morals is to educate a menace to society. And the Holy Bible says in Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, even when he is old, he will not depart from it. See, folks, by desiring to be seen as moderates, by desiring to not offend anyone, by attempting to be lukewarm, we have failed our children. We have failed to teach them that personal responsibility is inherent to being an American and enjoying the blessings of liberty. Stop playing it safe. Stop being afraid of having enemies. Understand that as long as you have an R after your name, they will hate you. There's nothing you can do or say to get the left or the mainstream media to like you, as long as you also have that R after your name. See, the presidential candidates the GOP ran in 2008 and 2012 were as moderate as you could get. Yep. And yet, when the election time came, they were called everything but a child of God by the left. Sure, they'll smile in your face, especially if you're taking a stand against your own party, as many so-called moderates do. But that rarely ever results in a win for the GOP in a statewide, let alone presidential race. If you think you're going to make enemies by taking a stand for liberty, good. That means you stood up for something at least one time in your life. In the play Julius Caesar, William Shakespeare wrote, a coward dies 1,000 times before his death, but the valiant taste of death but once. It seems to me most strange that men should fear, seeing that death, a necessary end, will come when it will come. The Holy Bible exhorts you to fear not over 365 times. There are 116 instances in the Bible where the scriptures tell you to have courage. My favorite being in Joshua 1:9, where it says, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous. Do not tremble or be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. The final sentence of the Declaration of Independence is a promise among the 56 signers to mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. But in the first part of that sentence they said, and for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence. That means God, if you didn't know what that means. See, are we so far degraded from our nation's founding fathers that we're afraid to simply take a stand against the left and risk what? An attempt to defame us? When the founding fathers risked everything, and many of them lost everything, yet they put their faith in God. And we all benefit from that today. Stop playing it safe. Those men risked everything because they believed in liberty. You know, I've heard it said that in an argument, he who believes strongest wins. I've also heard the British SAS, which is a special air service, and they have the motto that says, who dares wins. And don't mess with the SAS because they'll kill you in your sleep. If I I'm being honest with you, I'll tell you that I don't quite know what the GOP believes in right now. And you know what? The electorate, the people, don't know what the GOP believes in either. Honestly, I believe it's because the GOP has an identity issue that inevitably leads to a branding issue. But I'll come back to that. The GOP really has a character and integrity issue. And since we're in the midst of the NCAA basketball tournament, it seems appropriate to mention a quote from Coach John Wooden, who knew a thing or two about success. He coached the UCLA Bruins to 10 national championships in 12 years. But he said, be more concerned with your character than your reputation, because your character is what you really are, while your reputation is merely what others think you are. He also said the true test of a man's character is what he does when no one is watching. And speaking of integrity, best-selling author and motivational speaker Zig Ziglar said, with integrity, you have nothing to fear, since you have nothing to hide. With integrity, you'll do the right thing, so you'll have no guilt. In order for the GOP to have any real character and integrity, we have to know who we are. You must never let your enemies define you. And that is guaranteed to happen when you don't know who you are, and if you lack courage to stand up for what you believe. Stop playing it safe. The left knows who they are, and they don't hesitate to stand and fight for what they believe in. And that is why they are capturing the hearts and minds of younger generations. Let's jump back to William Lloyd Garrison. We all reside in the Metro DC area, which is none too respectfully called the swamp. If politics is the art of compromise, a man like Garrison was definitely not a swamp preacher, because he came to the table with an uncompromising moral stance. Even when it appeared that he lost, he won in the long term, because his stance on the issue of slavery at least forced people to think. He at least got the conversation going in the public square. In some cases, he even got a few swamp preachers to stiffen their spine and take a stronger moral position. Leonard Bacon was one such person. He was a senior editor at The Independent, which is a congregational journal, and although he fought against Garrison and generally held him in disdain for about 20 years, he eventually came around to seeing Garrison's way of thinking. He was later quoted as saying, "The eternal law of right is higher than any constitution. It is a rule for political action, and you know it. You must obey it." Let's get back to the branding subject. I believe the GOP needs to brand itself as being the party that is the unhyphenated party. Why do I promote an unhyphenated America? I do it because an America that is most peaceful is an unhyphenated America. An America that is most prosperous is an unhyphenated America. But mostly because an America that is true to itself is an unhyphenated America. In Acts 17:26 of the scriptures, the Apostle Paul found himself on Mars Hill speaking to the philosophers of ancient Greece, and he tells them that he, God, made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth. Remember, our nation was formed as these United States of America when the framers sought to form a more perfect union. And our Constitution became the official governing document of the land in June 1788, when New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify the document. But it must be noted that our nation had operated under the Articles of Confederation for 7 years prior to that, and had been simply a loose ragtag bunch of colonies for 5 years before that. But the whole thing was launched when those 56 men put their name on the Declaration of Independence. See, I believe that we're lost. Sometimes we need to turn back and retrace our steps so that we can figure out who we are, or in this case, where we are. Bear with me for a second as I take us back so that we can figure out who we are. I'm going to take us back to the portion of the foundational document that was the framework that our nation was built upon. As Thomas Jefferson, a Virginian, so eloquently wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the government. Honestly, it gives me goosebumps every time I read that. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that this is who the GOP is supposed to be. This is why we must be the party that doesn't believe in hyphenating our Americanness. Stop playing it safe. If we don't promote an America without hyphens, then there's nothing grand about this old party. For there's no partiality with God. He's no respecter of persons. In order for the GOP to be grand and for America to be great, there must be no partiality based on the most superficial aspect of our humanity, the color of our skin. See, I'm not talking about that tired old idea of trying to be the big tent party or the party that doesn't see color. See, on that note, folks, let me take a second and inform you about how things really are. See, I know what you feel you're saying. Truly, I do. But what you need to know is that it never goes over well when you say to someone, I don't see color. Folks, one of the first toys or learning tools that we give children as toddlers is a set of blocks made up of different shapes and colors. Of course we see color. We teach children to recognize and differentiate between shapes and colors, and there's nothing wrong with that. Here's what we don't do. We don't teach children that there's anything inherently superior or inferior about any of the blocks based on their shape or color.
Yes.
They're just blocks of different shapes and colors. And that is how we should see all of our fellow Americans. They're just Americans of different colors and shapes. We need to understand that we are all human beings created in the image of God from one blood. We need to get that belief in our hearts and minds. We need to get that belief that we're supposed to be free from the shackles of big government so that we can live in liberty, so that we can take personal responsibility to take care of ourselves and our families and loved ones, utilizing our precious free enterprise economic system. And when we've taken care of ourselves and our families, our belief will cause us to go out and out of the abundance of compassion in our hearts and wallets, we can help our fellow man who is in need, not just in America, but all over the world. Folks, when we understand who the GOP is supposed to be based on those biblical and foundational principles, that is when we are ready to fight against the smear tactics of the left. That's when we become like Neo in the Matrix, and we don't even have to dodge their bullets anymore, metaphorically speaking, of course. We don't have to simply try to play defense against the onslaught of identity politics. We can go on the offense with our message of an unhyphenated America. Folks, we have not because we ask not. We don't win with different ethnic minority groups because, like those Scottish nobles in Braveheart, we're afraid to fight for the votes of different ethnic minority groups. We say it's impossible. I'm trying to tell you that the way to eat a proverbial elephant is one bite at a time, knocking on one door at a time, one election cycle at a time. See, we don't need to flip the entire community of American blacks back to our ancestral home, the GOP, in one election cycle. We just need a few extra percent. Do you understand that in 2016, Donald J. Trump won the presidency because most people were either voting for him or against Hillary? But honestly, hardly anyone was voting for the GOP. You need to understand that reality. In 2012, the lukewarm moderate, Mitt Romney, got 27% of the Hispanic vote and 6% of the black vote. In 2016, the brawler, the brash New Yorker, the man who wasn't afraid to take a stand, the man who wasn't afraid to ask for the vote, got 29% of the Hispanic vote and 8% of the black vote. You see, if President Donald J. Trump gets the same 44% of the Hispanic vote, 11% of the black vote that President George W. Bush got in 2004, he will win in a landslide, and I personally believe that he will equal, if not exceed, those numbers. But the question is, what does the GOP do after Trump? Folks, if we want to not only remain relevant, but grow and become as dominant as we should be, we must stop playing it safe. We must know who we are. We must know why we exist. We must be bold and courageous, knowing that if we stand with God, no one can stand against us. And like William Wallace, we must not be afraid to go and fight. Frederick Douglass said that a man's rights rest in 3 boxes: the ballot box, the jury box, and the cartridge box. We must be willing to fight for freedom from the tyranny of big government. Fight for our liberty so that we can take care of ourselves and our families and our communities in the way we see fit. We must be willing to fight against the scourge of identity politics that threatens to tear this nation apart at the seams. Ladies and gentlemen, if you aren't willing to stand for our beliefs and fight for our freedom and liberty at the ballot box at this point in time, then I fear that our children may have to fight for them with the cartridge box later. The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Remember, he who believes strongest wins. Stop playing it safe. Good night. Thank you for having me, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Christopher Harris. Looking over the landscape and kind of